Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to our lecturers and panel. For today's presentation, our group will present about preservation of indigenous culture and tradition through tourism, a study of the Mah Meri community in Carey Island. Our group has 3 members, Asmaa Bt Khairussaleh, Fatin Amirah binti Mohamad Nizam, and myself, Siti Aisyah Mardhiah binti Ahmad Kamal. In this slide, I will present about the introduction. As we know, every country around the world have their own indigenous tribe. Indigenous homeland tourism has a competitive tourism advantage thanks to their distinctive cultures, inherent hospitality, and rising land values. Due to their unique natures, sustainable resource use, and preservation of their natural environment, indigenous homelands are the most desirable and prosperous tourist destination. Tourism helps local communities become economically independent while also supporting the preservation of the environment and cultural heritage. However, there is a chance that tourism will worsen the state of the environments and culture. During the course of this study, the researcher discovered 2 issues. The first issue is the diversity of races and customs in Malaysia is one of the things that draws people from all over the world to come and experience the variety in socializing in the communities. Apart from the 3 main ethnic communities such as Malays, Chinese and Indians, there are also other ethnic that many people may not know that are often forgotten and have been ignored by the citizens in Malaysia such as Negrito, Senoi and Proto-Malay. In order to preserve the authenticity from disappearing, people or tourists must have a good relationship and maintain interaction with other communities without neglecting their own indigenous norms. The next problem statement is promotion in indigenous culture of Mah Meri community has received relatively less attention nowadays. There are 2 research objectives and 2 research questions in this study. The first research objective is to examine the factors of preserving the culture of the Mah Meri community through tourism, and the second one is to identify the key challenges and opportunities for the Mah Meri community in preserving their culture and tradition through tourism. For the research question, this study will develop a local tourism content based on this question to enhance tourism education and awareness. First research question is how can tourism contribute to preserving the culture and tradition of the Mah Meri community? And the next research question, what are the key challenges and opportunities for the Mah Meri community in preserving their culture and tradition through tourism? The slide shows this study framework. This study have 2 independent variables, that is cultural program and initiative, while the other is challenges and opportunities. Preservation of indigenous culture and tradition through tourism is the Preservation of indigenous culture and tradition through tourism is the dependent variable. According to the conceptual framework, several theories or hypotheses are presented.
Indigenous peoples have distinct social, cultural, economic, and political characteristics dating back to pre-colonial periods. Throughout their history, they have faced challenges to their traditions and status. Aboriginal Australians have had a cultural and artistic renaissance despite the fact that their initial inhabitants lived on the continent for 60,000 to 70,000 years. The first humans came some 100,000 years ago, bringing with them 260 unique language groups and 500 dialects. Indigenous Australians live in these tiny family groupings with a strong emphasis on family, community and country bonds, and religion was strongly related to the land. Native Americans existed in the United States and Canada prior to European immigration. With various cultures and languages, the Pilgrims taught Indians how to coexist peacefully and Thanksgiving honors their generosity. As for New Zealand Aboriginal, Europeans found New Zealand after seeing parallels in features and cultures. As for Taiwan, it recognizes indigenous people as Tuzu or Yuan Jumin, but the People's Republic of China recognizes 56 Minzu, which is meta-ethnic groupings, and 55 ethnic minorities. Next, for the indigenous Malaysians, notably the Orang Asli tribe, first arrived in the region's rainforest 5,000 years ago. These tribes are made up of Semang, Senoi, and Proto-Malay tribes, each with its own language and culture. In Malaysia, the Orang Asli are marginalized, with Sabah and Sarawak having superior living circumstances. Malaysia's indigenous people accounted for 40% of the country's 33.45 million population in 2019. The Mah Meri communities in Malaysia's Carey Islands are well known for their fish business, and the Mah Meri people, an indigenous group famed for manufacturing high-quality wooden mugs. Despite being less well-known than Redang and the Tioman Islands, Mah Meri's traditional wood carving skills have acquired international praise. As for the education, the Malaysian Federal Constitution Education Act of 1996 and ILO Convention 169 guarantee indigenous people's right to education, ensuring equal opportunity and teaching in their native language. Handicraft, arts, language, conventions, rituals, and dances are examples of cultural heritage. The Mah Meri tribe is well known for its handicraft, ancestral spirits, and traditional festivities such as Hari Moyang, Puja Pantai, and the Main Ju'u Mas Dance. The Para-Aboriginal Foundation is aiming to preserve their culture and emphasizes community interaction. Meanwhile, the Mah Meri Cultural Village attempts to give employment while conserving its cultures, arts, and customs. Sustainable tourism emphasizes the smart use of economic, socio-cultural, and environmental resources in tourist development. On challenges and opportunities, sustainable rural tourist growth in Malaysia is critical for the economic, physical, and social well-being of the local people. The Mah Meri tribe has developed a distinct cultural identity that attracts tourists and generates tourism-related enterprises. As for government policy, Malaysia's National Ecotourism Plan strives to safeguard and preserve the country's natural and cultural heritage. The Mah Meri Cultural Village, which shows its wood carving abilities, traditional dances, rituals, and festivals, is supported by government. The Mah Meri people, on the other hand, stop issues such as cultural loss, environmental degradation, and economic inequities. Cultural preservation and environmental conservation are critical components of long-term rural economic growth. Therefore, tourism development in the Mah Meri community must be responsible, engage the community in decision-making processes, and minimize environmental problems in order to minimize obstacles and maximize advantages. On the preservation of indigenous culture and tradition through tourism, the survival of indigenous communities is dependent on the preservation of their cultural legacy, which is critical for their economic and social well-being. Preserving the architectural past minimizes dependency on new materials and energy while also protecting indigenous people's fundamental human rights. This decreases the need for additional materials and energy, resulting in employment creation and economic progress. Intangible cultural assets such as performance and craft are passed down orally, contributing to the economic viability of indigenous peoples. The World Intellectual Property Organization supports state laws to avoid copying. Historic preservation is residential construction that protects the beauty and importance of existing land, functioning as an architectural history of the community and offering relevance for the present and future. Lastly, cultural programs and initiatives and challenges and opportunities are the two independent variables examined in the theoretical framework. The preservation of indigenous culture and heritage through tourism is the dependent variable. The researchers want to investigate the influence of the subtopics on the cultural preservation of the Mah Meri community and to identify difficulties and opportunities for future generations.
The interview was held at Kampung Sungai Bumbun, Carey Island. A total of 155 people had been interviewed, villagers who live in Kampung Sungai Bumbun, Carey Island. Although they communicate using an heterosystic language, Malay language was used throughout the interview session. There were two categories of questions that had been asked. The first category was demographic, that includes gender, age, religion, marital status, family size, educational level, income level, and ownership. On the other hand, there were three categories that involve cultural programs and initiatives for Section B. It includes educational programs, the culture, community participation, handicraft, Mah Meri cultural village, as well as sustainability of indigenous tourism. Challenges and opportunities for Section C, that includes community involvement, government policy, and tourism development. Preservation of indigenous culture and tradition through tourism for Section D. One of the fundamental writing skills used as a measurement instrument in social science research was the Likert scale. The usual Likert scale has 5 or 7 response options that range from strongly disagree to strongly agree. The selection method that had been used in this study was judgmental sampling. A non-probability sampling technique was known as purposive sampling. It was a sampling strategy where the researcher selects participants from the population using the researcher's own discretion. The non-probability sampling technique, known as purposeful sampling, was used when the researcher makes the decisions about which items to include in the sample. Researchers frequently think that by exercising excellent judgment and obtaining a representative sample, they save time and money. The data had been analyzed using a program called SPSS, which initially stood for Statistical Package for the Social Sciences. To respond to the research topic and evaluate the hypothesis, the researcher performed the descriptive analysis, Cronbach alpha, and multiple linear regression. Researchers generate descriptive statistics and do quantitative data analysis using SPSS. The demographics of the samples had been fully summarized using descriptive statistics. In order to quantify the internal consistency of a test or scale, the Cronbach alpha statistic had been utilized. The associations between the variables and the various constructs had been examined using multiple linear regression.
In this section, researchers will share the findings from the Mah Meri community's indigenous resident responses to the questionnaire. Researchers used the SPSS programs for descriptive analysis, consistency, and multiple linear regression to analyze the results. The research includes 6 elements: educational programs, art, language, ritual and dance, community participation, handicraft, Mah Meri Community Village, and sustainability of indigenous tourism. For Table 3, when asking the question for educational program, the result can be concluded as for tourism, strong indigenous knowledge is essential, illustrated as the highest level of agreement, mean 4.39 for respondents. While my children can learn about and connect with their cultural backgrounds are contained with mean 3.84, and for tourism programs and project procedures are clear and accessible, carry the lowest level of agreement with mean 3.78. Table 4 shows how the question of art, language, ritual and dance descriptive statistics above influence the villagers in preserving their culture. It demonstrates that the majority of respondents agree with woodcarving, dancing and weaving skills important to attract tourists to Mah Meri village, with mean 4.45 out of 155 persons responding. Following that were agree with tourism activities contribute to the preservation and continuance of our artwork, with mean 4.30, and for do you agree that using art can expose Aboriginal culture to outsiders are the least agree to the respondent with mean 4.24. Table 5 of community participation demonstrate respondents agree with understanding, knowledge, and skills are developed to encourage participation. Following that was agreed that Mah Meri community has the opportunity to participate in tourism with mean 3.62, and for the ethnic group is well resources to participate are the least agreed on respondent with mean 3.35. According to the table 6 in handicraft descriptive statistic, among the 155 respondents, they agree with our community artwork such as masks and carving vital in people's life, while with mean 4.30 agree with older generation is willing to teach heritage to the youngster, and youngsters are eager to gain native knowledge from previous generation, get the list of level agreement with mean 3.24. According to table 7, it illustrates that the majority of respondents agree with the cultural center can pull many visitors to this village with mean 4.34 out of 155% responding. Following that, will agree with Mah Meri willing to maintain culture for tourism development with mean 4.03, and for tourism give Mah Meri village a sense of security for future generations are least agree with respondent with mean 3.94. Tourism growth in rural areas generally has a good impact on the environment. The respondents agree that tourism contribute to the sustainability of their village environments. From the table 8, the result can be concluded as for tourism, ancestral heritage must be preserved as the highest level of agreement with mean 4.50 for respondent in sustainability of indigenous tourism. While tourism is good for Mah Meri community, is contained with mean 4.41 and have a better lifestyle practice after the emergence of tourism carry the lowest level of agreement with mean 4.13. To answer research objective 2, which is to identify the key challenges and opportunities for the Mah Meri community in preserving their culture and tradition through tourism, there are 3 elements that will be included in this section. They are community involvement, government policy, and tourism development. According to table 9, the bulk of the respondent agrees with young people can learn about their heritage from the older generation with mean 4.01 out of 155% responding. Following that, the value for the question, there are suitable platform available to provide training to others, having 3.95. Meanwhile, there is just mean 3.72 for all ethnic group members have the opportunity to participate in the programs as the lowest level of agreement. From table 10, the result can be illustrated as the Mah Meri community of the natural environment is being protected for the future by the tourism industry as the highest level of agreement with mean 3.44 for respondent in government policy, while the value for the question able to discover where and how to get the resources needed to grow tourism are contained with mean 2.86. And do you personally think your government provides adequate financial support for local artists carry the lowest respondent level of agreement with mean 2.81. From table 11, researchers observe and it can be seen that the majority of respondents agree with tourism development of Mah Meri community promotes positive environmental ethics. Following that, the value for respondents who agree with able to conduct business independently without relying on others coming with mean 3.75, and for receive enough funding from the government to expand tourism are the least agreed according to the respondent. From table 12, the result can be illustrated as our country has improved in the field of tourism in maintaining tradition and culture for future generation as the highest level of agreement, with mean 4.37 for respondent in preservation of indigenous culture and tradition through tourism, while awareness of indigenous community has increased because of tourism are contained with mean 4.07, and tourism has created Mah Meri as beautiful image and environment of village and ethnic groups carry the lowest level of agreement with mean 3.99. The reliability statistic table, which is displayed, is the first significant table since it contains the real value for Chromebax Alpha. The reliability result of 155 religious pupil at Kampung Bumbun on our studies, researchers can observe that Chromebax Alpha for this independent variable of cultural programs and initiative is 0.881, is considered to have good reliability, while challenges and opportunity 0.764 obtain acceptable reliability. However, for dependent variables of preservation of indigenous culture and tradition through tourism, carry 0.558, indicating a poor reliability. In order to predict mean preservation, the researchers utilize multiple regression analysis. The result presented in the table 17 shows that the statistical significance of the variable used in predicting mean preservation was F 9 and 145 equal to 19.768, with P 0005 with an R square value of 0.551. It's worth noting that all time variables included analysis significantly contribute to the prediction of mean preservation. Hence, this finding demonstrate the importance and effectiveness of utilizing multiple regression analysis in research project that involve predicting outcome in multiple variables.
For this chapter 5, first I will explain about the study discussion. For hypothesis 1A, the study supports the hypothesis that education programs contribute to the preservation of indigenous culture and traditions through tourism. Respondents strongly believe that strong indigenous knowledge is essential for tourism, aligning with Article 14 of the UNDRIP, which recognizes indigenous education and self-determination. This can advance indigenous people's educational rights and raise public understanding of their importance. For hypothesis 1B, the SPSS results indicate that tourism plays a significant role in preserving indigenous culture and heritage. Woodcarving, dancing, and weaving skills are essential for attracting tourists to Mah Meri village. Enlightening visitors about their culture fosters solidarity and pride, allowing people to retain their heritage through tourism. This not only preserves their community, but also raises awareness of its existence globally. Next is the hypothesis 1C. The descriptive analysis results show that most respondents agree that understanding, knowledge, and skills are developed to encourage participation in tourism. This aligns with Solima International's finding and Kuna Sekaran findings, which emphasize community empowerment as a successful technique for preserving cultural heritage. The Mah Meri community recognized the importance of conserving their creative traditions for national relevance and government respect. This is evident in their tourist-related handicrafts such as masks, weavings, and wood carvings available online, travel guidebooks, publications, and the Tourism Malaysia website. For hypothesis 1D, the study supports the hypothesis that handicrafts preserve indigenous culture and tradition through tourism. Most respondents agree that community artwork such as masks and carvings is vital in people's lives. UNESCO recognizes these arts and actively participates in exhibitions and demonstrations. Malaysia's distinctive tourism product is Mah Meri handicrafts, including traditional weavings and sculptures. For hypothesis 1E, the descriptive analysis shows that tourism brings many people to Mah Meri cultural village, affecting the preservation of indigenous culture and customs. The village has been preserving sculptures and masks since 1951, providing an example for young sculptors. Visitors, students, and government officials visit weekly to learn about the village culture and traditions. Next is for hypothesis 1F. The study found that indigenous tourism sustainability positively impacts the preservation of indigenous culture and tradition. Respondents strongly agreed that ancestral heritage must be preserved for tourism, aiming for a better future and preserving mental and physical health. Social sustainability involves equitably treating all people and providing essential services. Next, for hypothesis 2A, the descriptive analysis found that majority of respondents agree that young people can learn about their heritage from older generations, highlighting the impact of community engagement on indigenous culture and tradition preservation through tourism. The literature study supports this hypothesis, stating that the community acts as a symbolic key to sustainable tourism. Parents and elder generations continue to teach their children and grandchildren to preserve their cultural and heritage. For hypothesis 2B, the study supports the hypothesis that government policy influences the preservation of indigenous culture and tradition through tourism. Respondents agree that the tourism industry protects the Mah Meri community's natural environment. Malaysia's policy efforts, including the 9th Malaysia Plan 2006 to 2010, promote tourism, craft sector growth, global market promotion, and heritage preservation. And the last one is for hypothesis 2C. Tourism development in Mah Meri community promotes positive environmental ethics, significantly impacting indigenous culture and customs. This growth benefits the community through cultural preservation, economic growth, and environmental protection. Fostering conservation efforts can conserve Mah Meri's natural resources and habitat. Next is the implications of the research. First is theoretical implication. Mah Meri culture studies offer significant theoretical implications for academic and theoretical knowledge. They highlight the importance of conserving indigenous knowledge systems, fostering traditional cultural manifestations, and addressing cultural hybridity and identity. This study also contributes to discussions on indigenous environmental ethics and resource management. Additionally, the study of Mah Meri's ecological knowledge can contribute to environmental awareness and sustainability. Next is managerial implication. To advance the welfare and self-determination of indigenous communities, management should acknowledge and protect their rights, promote cultural preservation, encourage sustainable livelihoods, provide education and skill-building opportunities, ensure access to healthcare and social services, and consult with the community on resource management. Participation and inclusion can strengthen the Mah Meri people's voice and agency in shaping their future. Encouraging sustainable environmental practices and cultural exchange can help preserve and promote respect for one another. Managers should work with regional NGOs, federal and state governments, and international organizations to advance sustainable development programs and fight for the rights of the Mah Meri community. And the last one is future study. First is expanding the search in villages near Kampung Sungai Bumbun. Future studies should explore Kampung Sungai Bumbun, Kampung Melayu Pulau Carey, and Kampung Orang Asli Sungai Rambai, considering Mah Meri tribes, as well as lack of technology advancement. Researchers face complications in remote regions due to poor internet connectivity and technological competence, resulting in longer questionnaire completion times and illiteracy among respondents.